Hello everyone, my name's Scott Story, and lately I have been reading a book about Franklin Booth, and a super illustrator and pen and ink artist from the late 19th and first half of the 20th century. And one thing I read was an observation that many were making called the cult of the beautiful girl, where artists who could draw women always got a lot more work and notoriety than more skilled artists who didn't specialize in drawing women. Well, clearly that never stopped. That goes on to this day. So I thought I would do a quick video on how to draw women from imagination. So, usually there will be a line of action. Now, if you draw a woman straight on at attention, the character loses all the energy and all the curvaceousness. In this case, I've started with a line of action that it will develop as we go on why that is. A typical young woman is about 8 heads tall. So, I've got her head, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, using heads as proportion is pretty much the standard all the way from the ancient Greek forward, classical proportions. So, the two things that matter most then are the line of the shoulders and the line of the hips. In that 8-head layout, the first 4 heads are the torso, and the second 4 heads are the legs. So, say we've got our woman half a head down thereabout. From the head is where her shoulder line starts. So we've accentuated the curve of her spine. And this misalignment, purposeful misalignment of the heads and hips is called contrapposto. It also, where the shoulders, the lines of the shoulders and the hips don't match. So like this is a side view and this is a straight view. I'm drawing this with a beanbag. So basically what I'm describing is when the chest and the hips are not in alignment. Now, ideally, the hips are about the same width as the shoulders. And the rib cage is about 1 3/4 of heads long. So there we go. Let's add on her shoulders. And in this case, we're just doing a simple face-on view. Now, let's talk about gravity. Essentially, the center of gravity beneath the head the feet will be distributed on each side of that, because obviously if her gravity is not centered, then she's going to fall over. Now, here's an exception to the 8-head rule. Let's say she's in high heels. That adds roughly an extra half a head to the body, making for an 8.5 long area. Okay, just drew the bikini area here. Be a slight gap in between. And a woman may actually look wider at the hips than at the shoulders, because even though the hips are just shoulder width, the leg continues to arch out. Then the upper leg, the thigh, looks a little bit like a bean, because there's this section of the leg which is straight, where the bone attaches to the hip, and then there's this section which comes out. So to center her legs Let's say she's arched her knee a little bit, raised her knee up. So she's got, since her hips are uneven, one of the legs is supporting the weight, the other is curved a little. Again, I've got the muscle that attaches to the hip and then the fleshier part on the inside. Now, the leg is thicker at the top to her thighs, and each part gets thinner. 2 heads. I'm revising that because I don't want her too wasp waist. There. There's a half a head between her chin and her collarbone. There is a central line following from her pubic area up through her belly along the ribs. The ribs on a woman are arched tightly. There's like an arrow pointing up. The neck technically is usually about as thick, as wide as the head, but it looks a little better in art if you make it probably 3/4 the width of the head. Okay, I'm going to take my eraser. I'm going to lighten this up a little bit because I don't want the details to get lost in the confusion of lines. I'm not going to cover the face today. That's a future video. But let's say her arms are at rest. They're out away from her body a little bit. Now, at rest, when turned out, the arms have a slight kink to them. The wrist usually hits about the pubic area. The bottom of the arms hit the bottom of the rib cage. So you can kind of see where we're going at. The shoulders slope up a little bit onto the neck, and the neck makes a V shape down. There's the collarbones. Very important. On the side where the neck is turned, a muscle visible right. So, breasts. The nipple level is usually at 2 heads. And the breasts start on the outside of the torso. Now, obviously this is a young lady. So she's nice and pert. All of these things change with age. The abdomen comes down at the crotch area. This part goes under. In fact, her gluteus maximus, or butt, is a little lower, so you can often see that down below here. There is a belly here. It's like a vase. Navel. So clearly, this is a young, fit woman. Now, when the leg is turned at the side, you don't draw that as a V. There's always the curve of the muscle. The ankles, the outer one is lower, and the ankles form like a collar over the foot. Now the shoulders muscles end at the nipple level, at the 2.5 head level. There's an angle inside the elbow. There's a slight recess there. And we'll just do a simplified hands on this. There's a ridge at the upper part of the outer arm. To make sure that I have everything in proportion correctly, I'm going to draw a line through the collarbones. I'm going to draw a line through the hips. Out here, those 2 points meet and it forms a axis that you can follow back to make sure everything is correct. Now, looking at this, as far as I'm concerned, those breasts sit too high. This is like an accordion, if you think about it, or a fan. There, I like that quite a bit better. Now remember, breasts sit on top of the rib cage, so they extend further out. So if the rib cage is like this, follow the curve on out. I usually use reference to make sure that I draw my ladies correctly. Okay, I think that arm, looking at the expanding accordion, I can see what I'm going to do next is I'm going to lighten this up and draw in her outlines, because women, because of their roundness and flexibility, are mostly defined by their outlines. You can have a relatively low modeled lady in front of a detailed background and she still looks good. I'm going to use a pen. Now, one of the things I've learned is there are no straight lines on a female. They're all curves. They all curve, all the curves curve out. They very rarely indent in. Because of the softness in the skin, there's usually like an S hook any place that the skin overlaps itself. In perspective, you can get a beautiful set of cascading curves, one in front of the other, but that's not really appropriate to this particular pose. S hook, curve, S hook, curve. If there's interest in this kind of education, I can go into more detail how to draw hands, feet, individual muscles. The way she's turned, this nipple is going to be angled out and this one is going to be more centered. Because remember, those are three-dimensional globes that have their own direction. Anyway, back to this. Simplification and fluidity is the key for a lady. Again, if there's interest, I can also get into the basics of posing and how to make an attractive pose. You don't need to overplay the ankles. There is a slight bump there, but it's just like you can't see it on the inside of this knee. There's a slight bump. The shoulders are one of those rare cases of a concave curve on a lady. There's a little concavity right here, inside the neck, inside the traps there. Let's remove all the pencil lines and we'll do a little shading to round out the forms. Let's imagine that the light is coming down over her left shoulder. I'm going to put some simple shading in underneath her neck, a little bit on her head. There's those concavities in the shoulder area. Another concavity there at her wishbone there. Remember, the breasts are spheres, so they are going to create some shadows. Wherever figures are turned away from the light, there will be a little shadow. The point is not to overshadow her. Too much rendering does not work well with women unless you're drawing a muscle woman, and that's not really what I do, so I'm just showing you something softer. It's a good example where the form turns back into the background, and so the light doesn't reach it and makes a shadow. There's a simplified single light source shading, and it's not a hard light. It's probably just like light daylight, just enough to give our form its roundness. With a simple shadow so she's not floating. Like I said, if there's interest, I can go into quite a few aspects of lighting, posing, and individual parts of anatomy. This is a huge subject, but it's also well worth knowing. Now, just to end up, I'm going to give her a little rim light here to help turn the form. You can see how that accentuates the 3D element. And again, this is not harsh light. Sure. I hope this was useful. If you have any questions about this, please leave me a comment and I'll be glad to address them either in the comments or in a future video, because the cult of the beautiful woman continues. As an artist, I always find it a little perplexing, but it is as it is. Thank you. This has been Scott Story. Talk to you soon. Bye.